Good afternoon to all the people closing the party here today. Welcome to the panel on Arctic higher education that has the title Towards Deeper Collaboration Across the North. So my name is Ann-Sofie Gremaud, as mentioned, and I'm on the board of the Institute of International Affairs, but I'm also affiliated with the School of Education here at the University of Iceland. And the first thing I want to do is to welcome our esteemed panelists. The first is Tuija, who is a professor at the Faculty of Education at the University of Lapland, and also a UArctic chair in education for social justice and diversity. And together with Turunen, we have Rasmus Leander Nielsen, who is the head of Ann-Sofie, Center for Foreign and Security Policy, and associate professor at the Department of Arctic Social Science and Economics at the University of Greenland. And with us, we also have Tom Barry from Akureyri, where he's the head of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. Welcome, Tom. And we also have with us Rögnvaldur Jóhann Sæmundsson, who is our own Pro-Rector for Science here at the University of Iceland. Nice to have you with us as well. So, in this panel session, we will be addressing other aspects, some aspects of the web of connectivity that Mr. Alexander addressed before, an aspect that is something that we can choose to strengthen or choose to weaken or try to make the most of, and that is collaboration when it comes to higher education in the Arctic. I wanted to begin with asking you to give some brief opening remarks as a kind of a check-in where you're at in your own fields, to get to know what you do at the moment. I wanted to invite you to share, we'll keep it to one aspect relating to higher education within the Arctic that you're especially preoccupied with at the moment, thinking about, excited about, worrying about, working about, in order to give us a sneak peek into what you do. So if you would start maybe, Tuija?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for having me in this panel. I'm delighted to be here. And yes, I've been thinking this kind of the burning issue, and currently I have lots of thoughts about the higher education degrees, which we are offering in our respective universities. They are often universal, so they kind of, we think that the one size fits all, so we can provide the same kind of degrees across for example, in Finland. And this is especially the case when we are talking about the qualification granting degrees, like teacher education, social workers, medical doctors. And this universalness then doesn't have very much space or room for the local context, or now we're talking about the Arctic-related themes. And that is something that I think that we should really carefully think about and have that inside in our higher education degrees in different fields. And then how do we do that, or is there a specific pedagogical or higher education pedagogy, or is there something that is designed for Arctic higher education, or is the pedagogy across the institutions across the globe similar? And that is the other thing, and there are a couple of examples, Arctic pedagogy and New Northern pedagogy, and there are universities who are actually applying these new ways of thinking, how to teach and learn in higher education institutions in many countries. And today we have heard about how to promote general public understanding of the science results and the consequences. And I think that the education might provide some very practical tools, pedagogical tools to actually promote learning and create teaching that then promotes learning. But these are my initial thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Interesting thoughts. Rasmus, would you share your preoccupations?
First of all, I should say that I'm a very late substitute for one of my favorite colleagues, Leander, who unfortunately had to go to Sisimiut rather than Reykjavik. And I actually want to use a quote from her, or maybe paraphrasing from memory, because we have a project on what is called the Arctic Basic Training Program in Gangerslusvak, Sønderstrømfjord in Danish. If you've been to Greenland, you've probably been through Sønderstrømfjord. And we have this project, and two of us are interested in military issues, Greenlandic foreign policy, whereas Mikla is basically in primary school and didactic learning, and also the public administration about the implementation gap that Elena raised this earlier this afternoon. And she was very interested in joining this group, even though it was more like a military research project or pilot project. And at some point she said, I couldn't give a red ass about the military aspect of this. What I'm interested in and why I want to join you guys in this project is because this new education is very, very interesting from this. They have been on what is called an education caravan in all of Greenland on the coast, and being really, really good at recruiting young Greenlanders that maybe don't want to go to university, maybe didn't fit in at the high school level. They're also really good at keeping the students in this program. We have, in a lot of the schooling system in Greenland, dropout percentages that could be better. And so she's very much interested in that project from an entirely different point of departure than the two others in the group that are military people. And that also relates to just one short comment that I want to make. Mm-hmm. This basic training program, I actually got also interested because I have some very good Canadian friends who have been studying the Canadian Ranger system and Inuit Ranger systems in Canada for decades, like Peter Kikart, Whitney Lackenbauer, etc. And then when I was talking to Greenland about putting up a new thing that wasn't a Rangers program, but it might actually turn into that, I was so occupied that we should have some comparative studies and also some little pilot project from one of our other colleagues with the ISAR program in Iceland and other. And at a year and a half ago, we had this conference in Nunavut, in Iqaluit in Nunavut, and I was doing so much work into coming from the Joint Arctic Command of Denmark to go to Nunavut so we can learn from the Canadian case. What was quite clear from just the first beer after the conference, which is one of the more important part of the conference, is that the Canadians could learn quite a lot from us. So what we want to do now, we have a pilot project about the Greenlandic case, which is really, really interesting. What we want to do eventually is to learn from Icelandic friends, from Canadian friends, from Alaskan friends, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Tom, if you would provide us with an insight into what is on your mind these days when it comes to higher education?
Well, what's actually on my mind at the moment is that the last time I sat in this room, I was defending my doctorate during COVID times. And then there was no chairs and there was no people, just my mother-in-law. So it's sort of strange to be up here again. But I'm relatively new to the world of higher education and academia, and I've spent many years in the Arctic Council, where I had responsibility for monitoring and assessment programs. And what struck me from that position always was the gap between bodies that decide policy or decisions in the Arctic, such as the Arctic Council, and our university system, and also through organizations such or networks such as the University of the Arctic. So now that I've started working in the world of academia, I begin to think about how can, for example, in Iceland, the Icelandic government make better use of the knowledge and expertise that sits in the universities, because by and large, it's government scientists that are engaged. And there's a wealth of knowledge and experience that could be utilized more effectively. And with that in mind, perhaps the one of the greatest challenges that we have in the Arctic at the moment is the cumulative nature of change and the rate at which that change is happening. And our challenge is, how do we shorten the time between when we detect something happening and we devise recommendations, advice, solutions in response to it? And what role can universities play in that process? So I'm sort of concerned with how we can ensure that the knowledge and expertise in university systems is more effectively utilized and informs evidence-based decision-making. Because as you can see, that's in threat in many places in the world. So how do we strengthen that? And how can we ensure that, at least in Iceland, where I live in the north of Iceland now, how we can ensure that the work that we do feeds better into that whole process? And it's really lovely to see people in the room as well.
It's good to have you back, Tom.
I remember when I was there at my graduation, after 3 or 4 hours, my mother-in-law sat in the car outside, turned to me and said, "Now, love, what were you talking about?" Sorry.
Rögnvaldur, would you share some of the things that you are thinking about at the moment?
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. Actually, I'm new to my job. I come from industrial engineering, from a background in innovation and entrepreneurship, focusing on that, but now as a Pro-Rector of Science. And actually, I have a hidden Icelandic title, because in English it's only Pro-Rector for Science, but in Icelandic it is Aðstoðarrektor vísinda og þverfræðileika, which basically means Pro-Rector for Science and cross-disciplinarity. So cross-disciplinarity is a lot on my mind right now. I think it's highly relevant, and maybe we could also frame it differently. I think what is on my mind is actually, how can we actually organize knowledge about the Arctic? Because we have a little of a paradox here, in some sense. We have the systems, the natural system, the cryosphere, the ecosystems, the cultural system, the geopolitical systems. They're very complex, and we need very specialized knowledge to understand those, all these interactions. And we are, most of the countries in the Arctic, we are small countries, but we need, and we don't, we can't build in our society on those vasts of specialized knowledge in some sense. So I think understanding the science, understanding the Arctic as a scientific project is really a global project. We need all the specialist knowledge in the world, so we should make sure to collaborate that, and everybody is everybody helps out understanding the Arctic. But then on the other hand, when we look at higher education as an education project, if you like, then we have to think about, okay, we cannot, it's and coming back to the link between science and action we've talked about, then it's not feasible to educate all these specialists. We have to organize knowledge in different ways that is appropriate for the society, the scale of the societies. And also we have to make that knowledge actionable in some sense. So we have to create some sort of programs that actually allow us to combine this very specialized knowledge in a particular ways that actually fit the communities or the people in the Arctic, and also try to make it actionable. And I think that's a kind of a paradox, but I think that's a lot on my mind. And one thing that I want to add as well, we have to make these programs attractive for young people. And I get a part of that is to create something that is based on the science, is recognizable when we're trying to get them in, but once we get them into the higher education system, they could sort of adapt it to their own interests, to their own needs, to their own communities and local knowledge. So I think that's a challenge. It's not easy, but I think so. This is on my mind, so to speak, because I think this is important.
Thank you very much. Latching on to what you said here last, Rögnvaldur, I wanted to ask you, Tuija, the question of how to ensure that specialist education or education in general, also in the fields that you mentioned briefly before, the social fields, the teachers' education programs, the nursing programs, doctors' programs, social workers, and so on. What are your experiences from your own university in Lapland of how to connect that to the local knowledge of the local needs? I would be curious to know that.
Yeah. Yes, and that's a hard question because I'm a professor of teacher education and leading our teacher education program, and I have not done a very good job because the program is so tight, it's so legislated very tightly, and then there's a long tradition of how to educate teachers. So those two things together make changes like this is a fundamental change how to think about education is very, very difficult. But we have some hope. We have a new professor, or a couple of years he came in, whose title is about Arctic. It's about Arctic knowledge, and it's a big title. But anyway, Professor Pekka Keskitalo. So we have that now in our faculty, which is a good thing. But I think that to actually have like you said, not also in higher education, but also in other educations, like the new kind of educational models or programs, which are attractive to young people. That is very important. Otherwise, they don't come into the programs. And I think that in our programs, because the education carries colonialistic load, and the ownership of the education is often regarded as not in the local community or not in the Arctic because the education has come from somewhere else. So we have to build the ownership of the programs and then turn our children and young people to kind of turn their back to south and look at the north and look at the similarities that we have across the Arctic. And it's amazing when that happens, when the young people or students at the university realize, okay, there are students like us who don't come from big cities. They come from rural Arctic areas. They have similar kind of things in their life. So that is, I think, the power of the collaboration we should enhance more in our Arctic education.
Picking up on that, I wanted to ask all of you to reflect on another question, namely, within the sectors of higher education that you have insights into, where you work, what would you say are the areas where you see the greatest need right now for Arctic collaboration, and why? And we can start at the other end, Rögnvaldur. Where do you see really clear needs for Arctic collaboration?
Yeah, I think this is a good question, and you can think about it in many ways. Obviously, we heard together that there are a lot of these kind of issues, like climate change and the permafrost. There are specific issues that are important. But it is very easy to be drawn into this kind of the changing geopolitical landscape and think about, okay, what does that imply? Sort of, what is the most important issue? And when I think about this, then maybe I don't want to spell out a particular area of problems. But I think what is important here in the Arctic is maybe to increase the Nordic collaboration in itself, actually, because I think we have very similar values, very similar ideas about things, and I think at these times it is important that we are actually very aligned in some sense. So that's a particular. So maybe because there are other. We talked about the interest in climate change, the interest in these things. I think we share values, and of course the Canadians are now maybe new to the club. Perhaps we could try to strengthen the connection with them. But I think this is really important to be united in some sense. I think that's required. So I think maybe that is, in some sense, maybe the most important form of collaboration, actually.
Thank you. What is your take on this, Tom, for where you stand?
I sort of have to disagree a little bit. Because I think there's an awful lot of cooperation happening. The Nordic Council is one of the biggest seed funders of activities across the Arctic. You have Nordforsk extending grant applications with North America. So I think more that we need to look at why we're doing science. For me, being in higher education now, the focus is how can we have an impact, a societal impact on the work that we do. So it's a question of the type of research that we do and linking that in a more effective way to decision-making processes, whether they be national or international. So from my perspective, when I look at research projects or activities within our university, I'm always thinking, okay, what impact might this have somewhere down the line on an issue that's of concern, be it environmental, social, economic, whatever that might be. How can we draw a line from the science to the policy to a measurable impact on the ground? So I think there's a lot of cooperation going on. I spent the last few days with the University of the Arctic thematic networks, and it was great to see all that work going on. But one of the challenges there, I think, is the slow, ponderous nature of science. It takes a long time to monitor, it takes a long time to assess. Like some of the big assessments in the Arctic, like the Arctic Biodiversity Assessment, they take 8 years, a decade to make. And by the time they're released, the picture they're presenting is of a world that's already radically changed. So I just go back to my first opening point as well, is how do we shorten the time between detection and response? And how can we ensure that we design the courses that we offer, the outputs that we deliver are delivered to the right people in a way that has a measurable impact, because time is short and we need to make an impact now rather than later. So often people say communication, cooperation, and they're great, they're buzzwords, but they don't actually impact upon what's happening. So.
Rasmus, would you share your perspective on some of the areas within higher education and Arctic collaboration in these fields that are where you see the greatest need for collaboration?
So I'm a trained political scientist, and we spend quite a lot of time learning to compare states or regions. And as the Arctic basic training example, we could learn a lot from the Canadians, etc. I teach comparative politics at the University of Greenland, and the first class we start, so who should we compare Greenland to? I start with a quote from a Kipling, kids writer, who said, who knows of England, who only knows of England. So we start by who knows of Greenland, who only knows of Greenland, and oftentimes we can learn a lot from Iceland, the independence movement, the not having a military, etc., etc. One of our biggest challenges is that the textbook we use at the University of Greenland are about Denmark, basically. It's like you read a whole chapter on some random municipality in Denmark or some issues so what we can really learn from each other is to learn some of the models of Nunavut, of Iceland in different issues. And to write these textbooks or learn from each other, we need funding. So that goes back, you mentioned the University of the Arctic, that has also been maybe a co-sponsor of this. I must say I've been a little bit critical about the University of the Arctic. I think the original idea of that was born out of the Arctic Council, that the smaller universities should have it easier to get funding. I tried when I just got to Greenland 9 years ago to apply for funding through that, and it seems like some of these networks, it was professors emeritus and emerita who were sitting on that specific network, so I kind of gave up. Now our university have actually taken over some of the secretariat of the University of the Arctic, so I'm hoping we can maybe pivot a little bit back to the original idea, and from that starting writing textbooks about things that are more Arctic than Western European, or really learning case studies that make sense to teach to our students, so that it's much more reliable for them rather than scannable municipality, or I forget where you born, Ann-Sofie, so that's somewhere in Jutland.
Yeah, close enough.
Close enough, yeah. So funding, as we have been discussing here, is something that could be really appreciative, and also, okay, so we meet once a year. I think it was 5 years ago. I went to this university for the first time and was sitting we did a roundtable, who are you? And I figured out Pia and I had quite a lot in common, and we've been talking about we should do something together. Then I talked to Celia about we should do something together. Then she became rector, and we probably don't have time to do something. So we are so few people, and your research community is 10 times the size of the Greenlandic one. Mm-hmm. So it's also like a number of persons issue, because we get invited to so many fundraising projects, and we are getting better and saying no to not just being a token that you might be in your nest. So we can take that up again, but we need personnel, we need money if we really want to make better textbook, make better education plans for our students.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that insight. And Tuija, what would you say are some of the areas where you see the greatest need for Nordic or Arctic collaboration?
Yeah, I think that I come back to the degree education. So we could, and it's actually shouldn't be that difficult to have a collaboration, some shared degrees. Then I have tried that, and with the different, even between Norway and Finland and Sweden, the difficulties or the differences of education political system and how to create curriculum and so on was amazing. But anyway, we can do part of degrees. We can share, nowadays we can do that via internet. Our students' language skills are quite good. I think that most of them can manage in English, because Finland is very different language from any other Nordic countries, and English is widely spoken. And the most urgent need is to understand the context of where the people, those professionals then work when they graduate, when they go to the field. And the context-based higher education is something that we, I don't know, maybe in Greenland you do it really well, because you kind of, I know about that you have designed your education in that way. And when I was listening to you, that I thought that, okay, there's one field where they do the context-based education very well, and that is military. Because they provide, in Finland we have the Arctic military, and they do it very, very well. And then it's very different from the southern part of Finland. So there is a field, and maybe we could ask military people, how do you actually do that? Because they also have their degrees and quite tight things.
That's a very interesting and surprising outcome, you know. But when I think about it, it's not the first time I hear this point coming from Finland or Finnish context, but we see some.
Yes, but I was just thinking that we can learn from.
Yeah.
So that is the other way that we can learn from different fields. And I said, okay, how do you do that? And then we can say, okay, how could we do that in our field?
Of course, I think that is you know, on a serious note, it is a very interesting and also cross-disciplinary point of view, coming from the inside of the deep knowledge of the field of education and seeing this tradition that has been in Greenland and in Finland of military local education. I wanted also to take the time for a question that relates to your brief point before, Rasmus, on tokenism, because the need to avoid tokenism in collaboration is still one of the challenges that we face in a time with immense interest in the Arctic. And I think some of you already have an experience with these issues. So I wanted to ask you, what is your take on this challenge of tokenism, and what have your institutions already done to fight this mechanism? Maybe we can start at Ilisimatusarfik this time.
Yeah, maybe I should start up. I'm not in Nuuk. I'm born in Denmark.
Yeah.
So this is layered, but what I can speak about is the locally anchored research. And I think from the decade I've spent in the research community in Greenland, I think we're getting so much better at this. There's been this tendency to there's an email popping in 2 days before a deadline for a big Horizon or Northforce project. And now we just say plain no, we need to be included, the nothing about us without us, and also being part of the research council is something that we really want to address, but we are very small. I mean, we can't address, but I think there is a really maturing thing, and there's a really good research strategy from Naalakkersuisut, the government of Greenland, that came out a couple of years ago, which both addresses that research needs to be for the benefit of local society and local communities, need to be locally anchored. We can't just get some money and then the PhD student sits in Finland or even further away. We're much more aware that it has to be for capacity building in Nuuk or in Greenland for these things. So the tokenism is definitely there. I still get emails that makes me really angry, like 2 days before deadline, you want to just sign up your logo on an application because they need some indigenous flavor to whatever, or climate change, and Greenland makes a lot of sense if you're doing an application. But I think there is a maturing research community in the making in Greenland that is I'm somewhat proud of, and it's only going to get better over time, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that insight. Tuija, what is your experience with this, and what is the University of Lapland doing to fight this mechanism?
Yes, it's a real thing, this tokenism, and I think that and often have the same issue a couple of days before, and especially now our Sami researchers have that a lot, and also the Sami communities and small local communities. And one answer that is that when you build up a research project, it's a real collaboration with the people. So they come in, and it's a long-term relationship. Maybe it's a project by project, but it's still like long-term, and you are doing, as I'm talking this as a researcher, I'm doing this together with these practitioners for their benefit. And they must really see that what is the benefit for them during the project and after that. And that means developing things together, like we have been developing with my colleague, Professor Pekka Keskitalo, online language school in Sami languages for now 7 years, together with them in several projects. And we have translated materials for them. We have together with them developed models how to do that, and that is a good cooperation. And we really respect the practitioners and their time and value that. So that is one way to fight that. And also very important is that if that's tomorrow you need to sign that, is to say no. I think that is also very important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for this, Tuija. And Tom, what are your insights from University of Akureyri?
Well, tokenism depends on the context as well. And I've worked extensively through the university and other places with indigenous peoples throughout the Arctic. And people like Ed in the previous panel are just inundated with requests to participate in different things. And it's often, as you said, Rasmus, at the very last moment, and you're just ticking a box. But one thing that I've seen in the University of Akureyri is that there's an increasing need for European-funded projects to actually have Icelandic partners. So I see that as a good form of tokenism because it establishes a connection, and we can start to get research money, and we can start to build upon that. So there are, minuses and pluses to that. But one thing that I was thinking about when I was thinking about what to say in this panel, also we need to think of tokenism in regards to science itself. So if you look at the Arctic Circle that's happening now in the next few days, or most of us are participating, you can see over the last 2 or 3 years there, that's a venue that people promoted as where you had meeting of business, industry, academia, all sorts of people. But over the last few years, it's become business-focused. And science has been pushed to the margins, it's been pushed to late in the evenings, it's been pushed, or if there's science on panels, it's scientists in a token way, just as it is done with indigenous people on different consortia. So it's a difficult question to answer. It depends on the context and where you're looking at it from.
Of course. Yeah. I myself had thought about this question in a similar way to what Rasmus and Tuija were answering, but I have felt the other type of tokenism throughout the years that you're reminding us of now to look out for and to resist, to speak up on. So thank you for that perspective on reminding us of that as well. I want to dedicate the last few minutes to giving you the chance as a newly appointed Pro-Rector, Rögnvaldur, to address this question of what we do here at the University of Iceland and what we might do even better in the future to avoid these tokenist mechanisms in how we reach out.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like Tom mentioned, I mean, tokenism has a positive and a negative side. And I've always felt my experience being, educated in the Nordics, often you are being, of course, the tokenism, like you said, it's a different context. It's often you have to tick a box. You have to have more women. You have to broader participation. You have to have a particular field, for example. Some science projects, they need a social scientist. So, and then at the last minute, you figure out that, okay, we have to find somebody. And then often it's somebody you know. And I think that's also a specific type of tokenism, maybe a bit more positive, because it is easier. And I think in general, I'm not sure, maybe people from University of Iceland will disagree with me. I'm not sure we've seen this as a problem, really.
Maybe from outside the university.
And that we should do something about it. I think also we are very sort of, when it comes to research collaboration and decisions about taking part in projects, it's very distributed. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of freedom in that. Mm-hmm. And I think we have now my phone is calling here in the back of my butt, so to speak. So I think we're quite sensitive to that as well, in some sense. But obviously you see the problems that you create more work for researchers. It's not as meaningful perhaps because it's kind of a last minute thing, and if you're part in too many projects, so I think it could create a lot of waste in some sense. So you lose a little bit focus on what you're doing because you are kind of always on the boundaries of different projects, and they might tend to be a little bit all over the place. But I think that's also a part of our reality in Iceland and maybe in other small countries. I mean, we have a really hard time to being a specialist because that's sort of really what there are many things, we have to take on many roles here. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, this type of tokenism is not really negative. It gives you a lot of training in those different things. So I have a little bit, from our perspective, and from that particular type of tokenism, I think there are also the positives of it. And I think we should, there's difficult for us as an institution to really, address or try to meddle with it in some way, I think. Hope that's clear.
Thank you. And I wanted to end on a very brief note that came to my mind on one of the previous Arctic circles where I met a former colleague and dean at the University of Greenland who said, I really wish people would consider that when we say no to collaboration, it's not because we don't want to collaborate, it's because people forget that when you're a tiny institution and very sought after, you need the resources, but you also want to keep a high level of self-respect, which means that you only want to participate in projects that you helped shape. And any serious researcher will recognize this way of thinking. So we all know better So I don't think we should stop contacting and bothering each other. We just have to do it the right way and show people the respect that we know we all deserve. So on that note, I want to thank you very much for giving us your time and input here. And I wish everyone a very nice Arctic Circle. Thank you for showing up.
So now we're at the end of this little prelude to the Arctic Circle Assembly. Let me begin by sincerely thanking you all for taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule to be with us here today. We believe it is incredibly important to offer an open event here at the University of Iceland on the eve of the Arctic Circle Assembly. This gathering gives students and academics who are not attending the assembly a valuable opportunity to hear directly from experts on Arctic issues. And let me just mention that we have had this video streamed all day, and I don't know how many have watched, but I hope a few of them at least have been students. As a public university, we take our role as educators seriously, and we are committed to fostering informed dialogue on pressing issues at all times. And we are undoubtedly living in challenging times. Yet I firmly believe that if we continue to listen to experts and engage openly with one another, we will be better equipped to address and navigate the challenges ahead. But before we conclude, I would like to invite you to join me in thanking my dedicated colleagues for their hard work. We see them sitting up here. Well, you're looking behind yourself. The two Rikes. And Gunnar and Esther and quite a few others that have participated in this. And then, of course, also to extend my gratitude to the University of the Arctic for their collaboration on this event. And then off you go to the Arctic Circle Assembly and enjoy yourself for the next few days. It's always, we often say the Arctic Circus, but I leave that as a joke. You have to end with a laugh, right? Thank you so much.